on his way. Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Motherfucker, he's on his...
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Listener discretion is advised. The show contains graphic language and depictions of violence. It may not be suitable for all audiences.
We say fuck a lot.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
What a crazy week it's been, Dylan.
Oh my gosh, a lot going on.
Yeah, it's been something else. I think many folks out there maybe a little sigh of relief just to know that like all of the intense campaigning has wrapped up.
Yeah, that's at the end of every cycle. It doesn't matter which way you vote or lean. I think I always feel a relief.
Yeah, just like, oh, good. I'm so glad for this to be over.
Yeah, I want all the signs going out in my local area, just being inundated with the letters in the mail and the commercials.
Attack ads.
Ads on YouTube. I'm just like, oh my God.
Feuding family members. But, I mean, I guess the good thing is we can prepare our arguments heading into Thanksgiving. You know,
I was going to say,
feuds.
This will fuel this year's Thanksgiving, which is a 2020 Thanksgiving, so who knows what'll happen.
You mean like the holiday from hell?
Yeah, like that.
All the turkeys will rise and defeat us, finally?
Yeah, I foresee something like a turkey...
Poultry war?
Some turkey flu that'll break right after everybody ate turkey, and we'll all be freaked out about that.
Everyone will have the shits, and then we'll be in another toilet paper crisis, and it's just going to spiral from there.
Oh, what movie is it where they poke the turkey and it like folds back?
Oh, that's the Christmas Vacation. She forgets to stuff the turkey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen to the turkey.
Can you believe, this is episode 111. Unbelievable, but we are heading into the Thanksgiving holiday, so I'm pretty jazzed about that because I love Thanksgiving food.
You were talking about putting the Christmas tree up already.
Yeah, I know. I'm not typically someone who jumps on the Christmas tree bandwagon. I mean, I have friends that would put it up in August. They love Christmas, but it's just been such a fucked up year that I'm like, maybe that'll bring us a little bit of joy to put the Christmas tree up.
And I agreed with you. I think we're going to lean into Christmas this year.
Yeah.
And just try really hard to be jovial.
Sentimental. Have some nice photos and make some traditions and crafts and food and whatnot.
Yeah, and we'll make a nice Christmas card and send it to all our listeners.
Well, I just want to give a special thanks to our friend Crystal. She's a patron and listener for inspiring today's show topic. She's also a listener who I've discovered is like my soul sister.
She's pretty awesome.
So thanks, Crystal, for inspiring today's show. You have a little bit of true crime news before we get started, right?
Yeah, so one interesting thing I saw a few days ago was they're going to combine the trials of Lori and Chad Daybell.
Okay, do we think that's a good idea?
Yeah, it's going to be one giant shit show.
Interesting.
Well, no, I guess if you step back and think from a procedural standpoint, that could raise some complications, right?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Well, that's a lot for one jury to handle. I mean, that's one way you got to look at it, right?
Yeah, and the cost.
Both of their stories.
I mean, I guess if they tried them separately, it would be a lot of financial cost that goes along with that.
I guess they're going to save a little money, but that's asking a lot of a jury, I think.
It is, but then I guess the story is just so bizarre that maybe you need both people there to really give the full presentation.
Well, I'm going to guess
the prosecution side.
That's what's driving the idea that they want to do this, because it's very probably key evidence to be able to bring, So, yeah, that's a good idea on your part. I think that might be the deciding factor on that.
Another bit of true crime news that I found I thought was very interesting. We've all seen those Salt Life stickers and the Salt Life apparel.
Yeah, apparently the people in the mountain up here are living the salt life.
There's a lot of Salt Lifers in the mountains. I mean, I love the Salt Life too, but I'm not going to put the sticker in my car. Well, the founder of Salt Life, his name is Michael Troy Hudo. He's accused of manslaughter in the death of an 18-year-old woman. And he's about to appear in court this week. Now, according to records, He is one of the co-founders of the Salt Life apparel brand. He was charged with manslaughter for allegedly fatally shooting 18-year-old Laura Grace Duncan inside a hotel in Riviera Beach, Florida.
What the hell, dude?
And he's being held in Duval County without bond. And this hearing will clear the way for there to be a transfer to authorities in Palm Beach County, where he's charged with a firearms possession violation.
Well, it sounds like something crazy went down.
Yeah, I'm not really sure what was going on. They found her body last Thursday morning in this hotel room at the Hilton Oceanfront Resort. She died from a single gunshot wound. So not exactly clear like what was going on. She was found when her parents called the hotel and asked for a welfare check. And that's how they discovered her. And there's not a lot of information right now about how she and Hudo knew each other, but that's just wow, another whoa story. And because that Salt Life brand is huge.
Yeah, I think that's from a business standpoint could be viewed as a very big success, right?
Yeah, I would think so.
As
it really
apparel, a brand. Yeah, also in Lori Vallow news, because it's just a gift that keeps giving. She had admitted 6 months after her husband Ryan died of a heart attack that she was considered murdering him.
Oh.
Yes, and you'll never guess where this audio that exists was recorded.
Where?
Well, it was recorded by Ryan's sister, Annie Cushing, at a meeting of the Doomsday Cult that she started with her fifth husband, Chad Daybell.
Okay.
Why is Annie going to the meetings? Maybe she just knew. It was like, I'm going to go record this crazy bitch.
Well, why do we all go to meetings? Because we're hoping they're catered.
Maybe that's what
we're
it
going
was.
for the Chick-fil-A sandwich, right?
I'm just here for the Chick-fil-A sandwich in the open bar.
Yeah, exactly. There's never an open bar at meetings, damn it.
Oh, God, 2020.
I just wanted to, real quick, let you know today's resources that I used for this show. A book called PTL by John Wigger and various newspaper articles, specifically the Charlotte Observer. A lot of news stories that I was able to use as a resource for today's story. Also, join us on patreon.com/Mountain Murders Podcast for bonus content. You can sign up for as low as $1 a month, guys. And we're going to host a virtual live show for patrons tomorrow evening, Monday. But if you want to join Patreon, you can be part of that.
Yeah, we know it's a bit short notice, but we hope some patrons hear this tomorrow, and we'll be trying a virtual live show tomorrow evening. And also, we're going to take a bit of a break from the normal stories. We're minus murder in this one, right?
We are. And also, we did skip our offbeat episode this past week, but we kind of had a hectic week. We had to go out of town real quick. And, of course, there was the election stuff. Dylan worked. So maybe we'll bring you an extra bonus episode this week. Maybe we can have 2 offbeats and a regular Mountain Murders. We'll see how that washes out.
Tell them what we was doing on Wednesday when we should have been doing offbeat.
Well, we had to drive to Michigan and back.
We had to drive from western North Carolina, right in Haywood County,
It was like 22 hours.
to Ann Arbor and back in the same day.
Yeah, it was very exhausting.
It turns out we were in the car for around 19 or 21 hours.
Maybe longer.
Oh, my God. I was about to die.
Yeah, I was delirious by the end of the trip.
It's like neither of us wanted to continue driving. We kept asking the other one if they wanted to drive.
I was like, can we just pull over and sleep in the car?
Yeah, and I was
You
like,
wouldn't let me.
we got to get back.
Oh, real quick. Rest in peace. Alex Trebek passed away at the age of 80. And I'm a huge Jeopardy fan, Dylan. You know I'm a trivia nerd.
She watches it on Netflix,
I
if that tells
fucking
you
love
anything.
Jeopardy.
Right.
And I rule Jeopardy. I would think I'd be a really good contestant.
You're pretty good. You know a lot about, a little bit about a lot of different stuff. And you know a whole lot about music and history and authors and shit.
Well, this breaks my heart because I grew up, many of us probably grew up watching Jeopardy and Alex Trebek. He was like a staple of my childhood.
You know, I'm reaching that point. I heard about this when I was younger, and I was like, whatever, I'll never get old. They say when you get in all the actors and actresses and the people you grew up, you know, pop icons.
Yeah,
and
pop culture.
everyone. So we've lost Sean Connery, 007, James Bond is dead, and Alex Trebek. And, of course, I could list 20 other people that I grew up seeing. And so, yeah, it's official. I'm old.
Oh, it's sad, man. I love Alex.
Oh my
I
gosh.
hope Jeopardy continues.
Oh, it's good. They were already. I think Alex knew he was getting even sicker.
Right.
Because they started toying. I started seeing. I don't know why, but like every article on Jeopardy's popping up. I searched one thing, one time, and it pops up every day now. And they tried, talked about the next host and things like that. So unfortunately, I think Alex knew, had been battling cancer,
Yes.
pancreatic.
I believe so.
I think so, because I was actually surprised.
That he lasted as long as he did.
Because
that's
he
a
was still
very
doing it.
Deadly
Yeah.
type of cancer.
He was still doing it earlier in the year. So, R.I.P. Alex Trebek. And he had all the answers.
Oh, I loved Alex.
And his enunciation.
And he had a good sense of humor. He was pretty funny. He would often make biting remarks at folks, and I thought it was hilarious.
If you want to watch something funny, go to YouTube and look up like Alex. It's like excerpts of his conversations with the people about their interests and such. And he's rather snarky, and he's pretty damn funny.
It is funny. So today, you were right, Dylan. We are going to take a bit of a departure from our typical true crime story. We're going to be talking about one of the biggest scandals in North Carolina's history. It is a true crime tale, void of murder, but it's still a wow story. So hold on to your butts.
It is a wow story, and there's beyond the big story that broke on it, there's a lot of other criminal activity, a lot of crime happening here.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. James Orson Bakker was born in Muskegon, Michigan, a blue-collar paper mill town, Dylan.
Ooh, I'd fit right in.
The son of Raleigh Baker and Fernia Lynette Irwin, she goes by Fern, Jim was a preemie, and he's left in the hospital incubator alone for some time. Unlike today, when parents are expected to be more hands-on in the NICU situation, this was a time when his mother was sent home and encouraged not to visit her baby.
Well, I think at that time, the medicine was a little more primitive as far as neonatal care. That's came a long ways in the last 15 or 20 years. But they were probably doing that, thought that was best for the baby. And, of course, now they've learned, I'm sure, that mom and dad's being around in the baby's first moments are very important. But, yeah.
Well, we now know that there's a lot of significance or impact of that physical touch for babies as far as development goes. So I'm sure being deprived of this can have some long-term effects, and that may actually explain some later behaviors for our central character in today's story, Jim Bakker.
Uh-oh.
Now, his father was a machinist for Sealed Power Corporation's piston ring plant, and he worked there for like 42 and a half years. And though his dad was employed and made a decent living, Jim grew up feeling like the family was poor.
Okay.
The family was Pentecostal, and though Jim felt the family was low income, they actually were fairly like middle to upper middle class in Muskegon. They moved into a mini mansion on Webster Avenue with a grand piano. So it's like a pretty big, nice house.
Well, it sounds like his dad must have been a few steps up, wasn't just a schlub on the floor production worker.
He was a machinist.
Well, machinists.
Pretty good money.
They made,
My dad was a machinist when I was a kid.
Yeah, well, that just goes to show you a good solid job with a nice hourly rate and good benefits back in the day. You could have a nice house and send kids to college.
It's true. Well, Jim's dad always bought Cadillacs, even though they were typically used vehicles. But it seems to be an insecurity that Jim would struggle with throughout his life, feeling like he was poor or from nothing.
Well, yeah, I guess.
It seems like an unfounded insecurity, but I mean, it's something that definitely kind of played on him for a long time.
Well, having not known that about him, you can definitely see that in his behavior later in years.
Growing up, Jim Bakker was a typical kid of the time. He loved I Love Lucy. I mean, who didn't? Jim's parents were not exactly warm and nurturing. Jim felt his parents were often distant. They were a stern Dutch family, and from what I've researched, his mother was like obsessed with cleanliness.
Now, the Dutch don't play around, especially back in the day. Isn't that where the idea of our basis for our penal system, is it Dutch? Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, you're asking me a Jeopardy question without giving me time to think about
Alex, what is? I don't know.
Exactly. So mom's obsessed with cleanliness. She believed cleanliness was next to godliness. So as you can imagine, probably always keeping the house spick and span and expecting the kids to be just as clean. And Raleigh washed out young Jim's mouth with Palmolive soap one time for saying, "Gee whiz."
Damn.
So these are not parents who are going to fuck around.
They're not. But you ever had your mouth washed out? I had my mouth washed out one time.
I don't think I ever have.
And it tasted bad.
I'm pretty sure I just had somebody smack my mouth and tell me that that's what keeps getting me in trouble.
Yeah, and then they started
sending me to my room.
telling parents you probably shouldn't put those chemicals in your kid's mouth.
Right. I always think of the Christmas Story.
The bar of soap.
The bar of soap. Kid's like, ugh.
And then his little buddy gets beat over the phone. She's on the phone and she beats the hell out of him. That's the best.
So young Jim would later describe himself as physically starved for affection throughout childhood. His grandmother, Ermilda Irwin, was the loving, kind person in his life. And Jim relished spending hours at her home as a boy because she was like the doting, affectionate grandmother. And being with her was really the only time he ever got hugs or kisses, praise, a pat on the shoulder.
Well, I'm sure with those rather stern-sounding parents who come off a bit cold, then I'm sure he relished in that attention.
Definitely. Well, the only time Jim felt a connection to his parents growing up was when the family attended church. This is like the one time everyone was together and, it seemed to be like a good day, like make a day of it. Meal, church, the whole thing. And Raleigh, Jim's father, was... well, I'm going to say this. Let me say Raleigh's father, I have to back that up, I'm a little confused. Raleigh's father, so that would be Jim's grandfather. He was one of the original organizers for the Central Assembly of God Church, and that's where the family attended church in the community.
So they're heavily involved.
Yeah.
Okay.
Joe Bakker, Jim's grandfather, was also pretty hard on his wife and kids. A relative would later call him a bad seed. So even though he's very active in the church, he doesn't sound like such a nice man.
Oh, not a hypocrite at church.
Which might explain why Jim's father, Raleigh, wasn't super loving with his children or, physically, I guess, affectionate. Because he grew up with a dad that doesn't sound like he was as well.
There's a lot of good people in church. And if tomorrow you took all the church, outreach and community help they do to people, especially in rural towns, away, there'd be a crisis in this country. And there's plenty of good people there. But we've all know that there's the hypocritic person who hides behind the guise of being very spiritual.
My dad.
Well,
I'm sorry, what?
We know these types. And if you go to church or don't, you know these types of people. And I just think it's like the damn, I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's like the epitome of hypocrisy. When you present this one, I'm holy and, all these caring things, but you're really just a really big asshole or even a monster sometimes.
Yeah.
But they trick people with that. They disarm people with that.
We're all sinners, Dylan.
Oh, my God.
In the Pentecostal church, Jim grew up adhering to certain rules, like you don't go to the movies, you don't dance, footloose, bowl, play cards, shoot pool, or listen to rock and roll music. So pretty much all the fun things.
Man, if you can't dance or listen to music, that's too much. That's being too happy on earth or whatever reason they do that for. That would suck to be that strict. I would not want to live like that.
No, you would have to organize a prom in a mill across town.
I would have to go dance frustratedly in like an abandoned factory.
Yeah.
Dude, there's parts of the mill that are abandoned.
You'd be like Kenny Loggins.
I'm going to totally wear the outfit to work.
Please do. You should. I feel like this would make a great TikTok or something.
And reenact Kevin Bacon's frustrated dancing in the abandoned factory.
Well, baby, you move pretty good for a big boy. Well, the tension between his religious upbringing and sins of the flesh would put Jim in constant turmoil. As a young teen, he would sneak out from church with a group of friends, and they would go across the street to the drugstore where they would drink Cokes, listen to Fats Domino, play music on the jukebox, and then they would sneak back into church before the sermon was over.
Oh, my God. They were a rough and tumble bunch, weren't they?
Dylan, just to get into a little bit of background on the Assemblies of God and the Pentecostal Church, you have like a brief history of this denomination. And I only feel like maybe we should provide a little bit of background for our listeners in case they're not familiar. Because of the Christian denominations and the churches that I've attended, the Assemblies of God, like the Pentecostal Church, is very different from, say, the Southern Baptist Church I grew up in, or the Presbyterian Church or Methodist Church, just in the way they worship and their beliefs. I'm not going to say their central beliefs, but they have a little different ideas.
Well, yeah, it's quite different, and I think anyone who's ever been or to a Baptist church and then maybe a Pentecostal church, you can see the difference, just the way they interact with their beliefs and it sounds like it leans more towards the Holy Spirit,
yes,
being baptized in the Holy Spirit, and that's more of the Trinity, I guess, if you will. That one you can kind of interact with, you feel it. You feel the Holy Spirit. You know the cliche old woman jumping up at church talking about, acting very animated and maybe very excited because they got the Holy Spirit.
Right. Okay.
So the Assemblies of God hold to a conservative evangelical theology as expressed in the statement of the fundamental truths and position papers, which I have no idea what that is. But I'm going to guess that's their core doctrine or whatever. And so it is...
It was founded in 1914. So it's a denomination that's not very old. I mean, it's not like the Catholic denomination that's been around for some centuries.
Yeah, they had I think it was in Iowa, they had a meeting of all the different branches, and they kind of joined in together into the Church of God, all under one roof, under one tent, if you will, which I find interesting, where some religions come together and intersect and then start a whole new thing. And it is, like Heather said, it's very excited, very vocal, loud, a very energetic crowd.
No, very.
And sometimes you will see things such as speaking of tongues, divine healing, or the laying of the hands.
Yeah, I've been to a Pentecostal church before, and I've seen speaking in tongues. Someone might come up to the front that's having a ailment, and many people from the congregation, including the minister, they'll all gather around, lay hands on this person, pray for them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if that works on my bad knee.
I don't know.
And baptism in the Holy Spirit. So it's more of a personal relation. It seems to be more of a personal relationship, a direct relationship with the Spirit of God.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I find interesting, and we're going off on a little tangent here, but I just feel like this is all pertinent to our story in some ways. Women in the United Pentecostal churches, they look different from females in other Christian denominations. Like, they don't wear slacks because they immodestly reveal the feminine contours of the upper leg, thigh, and hip. No makeup, no jewelry except for like a wedding ring and a wristwatch. No low necklines, no sleeveless dresses or shirts. No very tight or very thin clothing. No dress hemlines at or above the knee. No sleeves above the elbow, and uncut hair.
Whoa.
I remember going to elementary school with some sisters who were Pentecostal. And they wore dresses always. But the one girl, her name was Mary, she had hair and it was so long. I mean, it was far below her butt, in the back of her thighs. But just beautiful hair. It was just so long. I always thought, we were kids, but I would always think she looks like a mermaid because her hair was so long and beautiful.
Your mom probably gave it 100 strokes with an old horsehair brush every night.
You think so?
Maybe. Well, I was working one time beside a Church of God and putting a fence up. And we were there for a couple of days, and the women would come out and ask us if we would take a break, and they wanted to wash our feet and feed us some really good church food.
That's amazing.
So I was tempted.
Well, yeah.
Because of the church food. And
they didn't really want to wash your feet, trust me.
They were, I'm saying they were going to. That's what they were offering. So
they just didn't know what they was getting into, sir.
I got boot feet.
Okay.
But they don't stink.
Let's get back to the story.
Yeah, so they're pretty they believe strongly in their Pentecostal ways, I do believe.
At the age of 11, a man who was maybe between 25 and 30 years old that attended church with Jim invited the young Bakker out for a hamburger. And Jim Bakker accepted the invitation only to be molested by this man.
How old was he?
11.
Oh, my God.
Well, instead of fearing that this behavior was wrong, Jim actually felt really happy because an adult was paying attention to him, and it made him feel really special.
Well, that's sad. That's very sad for him to have that reaction because he'd been so emotionally starved in his relationship with all the adults around him.
Well, it's true, but this is also just like textbook grooming.
Well, that's true.
You know? I mean, and it's these fucking pedophiles, they have a way of like being able to like sort of radar in on like the one child that maybe needs that connection or is vulnerable.
I guarantee
and then they're
you're
able
right.
to groom that child. And that's what happened here. And the molestation continued until Bakker was in high school. Jim would spend years trying to reconcile his feelings about what happened. I mean, he knew he wasn't homosexual, but he felt like many victims do, like that he brought it on himself.
Right.
And then he felt guilty because there was this kind of small part of him, I'm not going to say that enjoyed, obviously, what was happening to him, but had enjoyed the relationship. Just having an adult that was interested in him, paid attention to him, like it gave him something he wasn't getting at home.
Well, and it continued for a number of years up into his young adulthood. So, I mean, obviously, yeah, I'm sure he had a lot of mixed feelings and didn't know exactly what to think about all that.
Well, he also knew that, I mean, he's living in, this is the 1950s, and he's living in this, you know, small, like very blue collar town, super religious family. He just knew there was no way he could have ever told anybody like what happened, especially his family. And it wasn't until 1990 that he finally confided this information like to a psychologist and talked about the abuse.
Oh my God.
That's a long time to keep that in, you know? Academically, Jim struggled. He was willing to learn and very eager, but teachers considered him slow. Just not up to par. He was a terrible speller. And though he was really eager and like came to class and did his work, like he just seemed to struggle. And I'm thinking, you know, he probably had some kind of learning disability.
It definitely sounds like he could have.
You know, undiagnosed. And eventually he'd have to repeat his senior year of high school. But Bakker was creative and he would become a photographer and eventual editor of the school newspaper. He was really great at promoting events, being in front of a crowd, performing. He organized a vaudeville type of fundraiser and directed the show for like 2 years while he was in high school to raise money for the school. And it was wildly popular, like would sell out. People would be, you know, champing at the bit to get their hands on tickets to this high school show.
Yeah.
Wanted to fill the auditorium.
It sounds like you'd want to be a part of the young Bakker's shows. And it sounds really fun. It sounds like he was very good at marketing and things like that and putting up production.
And his involvement in the school newspaper and, you know, kind of the journalism classes. He had a teacher that felt he was really great writer and that he should, you know, he had a good voice, that he should be a reporter or something, and kind of encouraged him, like, you should really pursue journalism. I think you could be really good at this. But a big moment in Jim's youth was defined by a terrible accident. Jim was driving his father's 1952 Cadillac, and he was dropping off a childhood friend named Sandy Tears at her home on a snowy night. And this was his sophomore year of high school. He felt a bump under the tire, and that's when he realized that a 3-year-old boy named Jimmy Summerfield had rolled down a snowbank and under his car.
Oh, my God.
Like, just as he's backing out.
Oh, my gosh.
And though the boy suffered injuries, he miraculously, like, pulled through. There wasn't any, like, life-suffering injuries or any long-term damage.
Shoot.
Like, the kid was injured briefly and then was, like, back at it.
I'm going to guess the things being snow-covered probably helped him not get injured as bad.
It was then and there that Jim felt he needed to serve God. Like, he felt this was a miracle. This was something, like, that saved this boy, like, basically saved Jim. And he thought, okay, this is it. Like, I have to devote my life to God.
Well, I mean, if you experience, you know, running over, feeling, you know, enough to feel the little boy underneath the vehicle, if it was a tire going over or him bumping against her or whatever, that might leave a pretty strong impression if this kid just, makes it through with as good as he could be.
Now, this was something that he would go on to relay, like the story throughout his career, like as part of his testimony and why he would, wanted to become a minister and do what he did. Like this was a story he would tell others for many years to come.
That is sounds like a very horrible happenstance of pure accident. You don't even see the kid or anything.
Yeah.
But could you imagine, like, telling that story over and be like, and when that little 3-year-old boy, he came up in front of my daddy's 52 Cadillac, I tell you what, I knew right then and there that Jesus needed me to serve him.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, he decided that he wanted to attend Bible college. By 1959, Bakker was attending the North Central University, which is a Bible college affiliated with the Assemblies of God in Minneapolis. And though a high school teacher had urged him to study journalism, Jim turned his back on that and wanted to pursue being a minister. Now, Pentecostalism had swept through the country in the early 20th century, and North Central University was much like the Assemblies of God. They believed Jesus was coming soon, and God intended to restore believers' spiritual power of the first century church in the perilous last days. And today, Assemblies of God, they have more than 50 million followers worldwide.
Yeah, well, I want to say it's either the largest or one of the largest, groups or branches of religion in America.
At college, Jim became co-editor of the school newspaper. He performed in missionary plays. He also began attending a church that was run by a husband and wife team. And during this time, Bakker finally received baptism in the Holy Spirit with speaking in tongues, which was a rite of passage for Pentecostals. So this is like the first time he truly felt he was bathed in the Spirit, baptized in the Spirit, and got that ability to speak in tongues.
Oh, sounds like a big deal.
Yeah, it was. And it was after this that he returned home for Christmas and broke up with his high school girlfriend. Her name was Sally Wickerink. And he told her he wanted a wife who was going to be an equal partner in a ministry. And that Sally just didn't fit the bill. She didn't attend church, didn't attend his church, but I don't think attended church at all. And just wasn't down for the life of being a preacher's wife, much less being like a double husband and wife ministry team.
Well, it sounds like the young Jim already has an idea what direction he might want to start to go. And, she has to be rather religious and devout to be Pentecostal, his type of Pentecostal.
Right. And his attendance at the church that was ran by this husband and wife team, it really impressed him. Like he thought, and especially the wife was very charismatic and engaging, and he was just enamored with this couple. I mean, they seemingly had a really wonderful, devoted, loving marriage, and they both were moved by the Spirit and would get up and just preach these very dynamic sermons. And there was music. And I mean, he just was like, wow, he saw his future in this couple. This is what I want.
And, seeing two people that really admired each other and were connected, strongly, emotionally, that is.
It was in 1960 that he met a fellow student named Tammy Faye LaValle. Now, when Bakker met Tammy Faye, she was not the woman we all know today. You've heard the name Tammy Faye Bakker, style icon, famous for her layers of makeup.
Yeah, and you were like, oh, Tammy Faye Bakker, I wanted her makeup when I was young. And I thought you were kidding at first, but you weren't kidding.
No, I love tacky.
So she was way ahead of her time with makeup, right? The contouring and stuff. I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
She went all out.
Yeah, she was really famous. There's a documentary called The Eyes of Tammy Faye that I remember watching probably 15 years ago or something. But she was known for her eye makeup because it was so dramatic. She had multiple layers of mascara. I'm not even sure if they were false eyelashes.
She might have grew her
but
shit out.
Falsies with tons and tons of mascara. They were almost like spider eyes, right? And then she would cry and her makeup would run down her face.
Oh, yeah.
So she was really famous for that. But I fucking love Tammy Faye, okay? She holds a special place in my heart. She's a style icon.
Yeah, the mascara running when she cried.
I grew up in the 80s loving those women with the big shoulder pads and the crazy eye makeup. Okay, so when Baker met her, she wasn't like that at all. She was very plain, makeupless. She was young, just very au naturel. And Tammy grew up in International Falls, Minnesota, in a house without indoor plumbing. She was the oldest of 8 children born before her parents divorced. And when she was 3, her mother remarried. Her family had no money, and they lived in a squalid home where the entire family took a bath on Saturdays.
Oh, my gosh.
And they would work at, like, the cleanest child took a bath first, and they would all use the same hot water that her mother heated over an open fire.
Damn, that's a lot of work to bathe those dirty kids.
Yeah. She grew up as a babysitter for her brothers and sisters in this very poor working class town. And due to her mother's divorce, the church where Tammy grew up saw her family as different. Her mother was considered a harlot by the Full Gospel Assembly.
Yeah, they told my mom one time she started going to a new Baptist church, and it was a pretty ritzy one, in my opinion, as a kid. And they told her, we don't have a Bible class for divorced women, so we're not sure which one to put you in. Like, you're just like, what the hell? This is not a good start.
Her mother gave more money than the family could afford when tithing, and her mom volunteered at every church function, yet was still refused access to play piano or even pray at the altar.
Well, that just doesn't sound like a church I want to join.
She was told to kneel and pray at her pew instead, that she wasn't allowed at the front of the church. And Tammy Faye remembered the pastor and his wife visiting her home about once a week. And they would basically sit her mother in a chair and then yell and scream at her mother about what a sinner she was. Yeah, Tammy growing up was like, I don't know why my mom endured any of this.
Man, it sounds like Dolly Parton and Tanya Harding's upbringing mixed together.
Tammy had a close relationship growing up with her aunt named Virginia, and she calls her Gin, Gin, like the drink. And her aunt offered attention that her own mother couldn't provide. And she mostly ended up attending church with her aunt instead of going to her mother's church. She just didn't feel very welcome there.
Yeah, you can't blame her.
Her Aunt Jen had worked at Woolworth's department store for 44 years, and she permed her hair, meaning Tammy's hair. She would make dresses for Tammy, took her out to eat in fancy restaurants, just things that Tammy's own mother couldn't really afford to do. And so hanging out with her Aunt Jen was kind of cool because she was like this liberated, working woman who had her own money and permed Tammy's hair and made her dresses and took her out to eat. So it was like Tammy just thought her aunt was like so glamorous because her mother was very plain. She grew up very plain.
Well, it sounds like everything in her life up to that point in that household was plain.
Yes.
And that's not, I'm not speaking ill of her mother. It sounded like she was trying hard as she could.
Right. Well, Aunt Jen got Tammy a job at Woolworth's when she was 15. And while she was in high school, she was really popular in school and church. She was elected 2 years in a row as the Queen of Bible Camp. She sang in the choir. She got parts in school plays, such as Oklahoma. And growing up, Tammy was taught if you wore lipstick, you were going to hell. So being on stage for the first time, she was not sure when they told her, like, we want to put makeup on you.
Oh, my gosh, dude. This is so interesting listening about Jim and Tammy growing up because I never heard any of that, beyond the scandal and everything that happened after, when I was a little kid. But that explains so many things about how they acted and presented themselves later in life.
Oh, yeah, we'll get into all of that.
Oh, my gosh.
So, being on stage, this is the first time she's ever worn makeup. Tammy was described by those who knew her as quiet, reserved, and a very serious girl. And she was academically like a great student, super smart. I mean, people who knew her were like, the Tammy that was presented later on television is not at all the Tammy we knew. Because she was just super serious, quiet, reserved, super smart.
So it's like she created a character.
Sounds about right.
Oh, my gosh.
She's like Paris Hilton. And though women, especially in her religious circles, were not encouraged to attend college, Aunt Jen had been saving up money secretly to pay for Tammy's education.
Really?
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
She's a pretty great aunt.
She is. When Jim met Tammy, he said she was absolutely the cutest girl he'd ever seen. So he is blown away by her. On their first date, they went to a Wednesday night meeting at Jim's church where he'd become the youth director. And by their third date, he had already proposed.
Oh, wow.
Tammy said she had no doubts that she wanted to marry him. It was like love at first sight.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Jim was 5'4", and he weighed about 130 pounds, and Tammy was only 4'11" and weighed 73 pounds when she met Jim. And she said they looked great together.
Yeah, I guess they're perfectly proportioned for each other.
She said she was like, just the way we looked was so great together. Everybody knew, like, you guys are the cutest. You two need to be together. So she was just like, oh, we were so cute.
Oh my gosh, that's what people say about us.
No, they don't.
Yeah, they do.
Who? Who says that?
Strangers come up to us and say, you guys are so cute. You look like you belong together.
That must have been your ex or something.
No, it happens all the time to us.
Well, the Bakkers did not offer Tammy the kind of warm reception that she had hoped for. When she first met Jim's parents, she was awestruck by their lavish home. She had never seen such a luxury in a house before. I mean, they had velvet drapes, a piano, beautiful furniture.
And she'd be happy with an electric stove and damn hot water heater.
Yeah, I mean, she was just like, wow. And at some point during her first visit, Jim's sister Donna allowed Tammy to try on her wedding dress. And Mr. Bakker, Jim's father, happened to walk in the room and see Tammy standing there wearing this wedding dress, and he was furious.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So there's a story where they try to smuggle the wedding dress back to Minneapolis.
So they want to use this dress.
Yes. And Donna, Jim's sister, and I guess her husband and Jim, they're trying to get back to Minneapolis, and they have the dress in the car. They have a car breakdown, and Jim's father has to come and pick them up. And he grabs the dress, puts it in the trunk of his car, and refuses to let them take it to Minneapolis.
Well, I mean, he's a very traditional man, and I guess this is probably all moving a little fast for him.
He was very upset about, he didn't want Jim to drop out of college, and he was very upset about the idea that Jim might not finish school to marry this girl that you just met, who, she comes from nothing. What?
Well, and that's an understandable feeling as a parent.
Well, the college didn't allow students to marry, so Jim and Tammy Faye's grades both plummeted. They decided to drop out.
And that's exactly what the parents were afraid would happen.
Tammy worked at Woolworths, and Jim bussed tables. They rented a third-floor walk-up apartment for $60 a month. On April 1st, 1961, Jim and Tammy Faye were married. When Jim visited Tammy's house for the first time, he was in shock.
The opposite end of the spectrum.
Exactly. Just as Tammy had been like, what? When she saw Jim's childhood home, he is equally like, what? When he sees where she grew up. And this is kind of a funny story. Tammy just thought this was hilarious, and it was something that she would kind of, recall years later when telling this cute story about Jim. They go to her family's home. He obviously is like, wow, this is very rustic. Not what I was expecting.
Rustic.
And he asks for a bath. And so Tammy brings him 2 tubs, wash tubs, full of water, right? He sat down in one of them and put his feet in the other, soaking. And she laughed and laughed and had to explain to him, one is for washing, one's for rinsing.
Yeah.
And so this was a story that she just thought was so funny.
Well, that does sound like something you'd remember.
Yeah, definitely. So it was kind of one of their cute little stories. So it seems that these 2 birds of a feather did truly seem to be in love, and they delighted in their differences. Bakker continued serving along with Tammy as youth ministers at the Minneapolis church, and one day Jim asked Fern Olson, the wife of the evangelical team, how to become successful. And her answer was results. She explained to Jim that if you want to be successful, and especially be a successful evangelist, and you want to get churches to call you, you have to get results.
Yeah, so pack the house and everyone be happy and present a good show.
It's nice to have theory, but the only way you're going to have any value to that theory is if you get results. Like, you have to be able to demonstrate these results to be like, yeah, see what I'm saying works.
Right.
And he really takes this advice to heart. So he's like, okay, I have to have results if I'm going to be a minister. Jim and Tammy began a small, like Pentecostal sort of healing team, and they start traveling a circuit from church to church in the Bible Belt. For about 6 months, they preached across North Carolina, sometimes being paid only $30 a week. Once they were paid with a live chicken.
Huh, here's your chicken, thanks.
Tammy Faye turned the chicken into a pet. She just couldn't bear to eat the chicken.
I would keep that chicken. I would name it Nuggets. Right?
Yes. Tammy knew how to play piano, and she taught herself the organ as well. They were couch surfing, sleeping in musty old churches, bathing in sinks. Life was hard. Money was tight. They were barely feeding themselves.
See, I wonder if those churches were getting a great deal for their money, and they were getting like an early version of what they would become. You know, a pretty damn good team, and very big in their world.
After a few years of life on the road and having nothing, they decided to buy a 28-foot trailer, and they towed it behind their 59 Cadillac. They wanted to broaden their appeal, so they added a puppet show for kids to add this at like their meeting so that kids could be entertained as well. And the puppet show was a hit, and word spread around until a man named Pat Robertson.
Hey, well, I've heard of him.
He heard of these guys, and he was like, Well, he created the Christian Broadcasting Network, which at the time didn't have a huge viewership. He was struggling to find an audience, and Robertson reached out to the Bakkers, asked them to join the network.
Yeah, so he needs some material, some content.
He needs
content that people want to see.
In 1965, the Bakkers join up with Pat Robertson. Now, Robertson and Bakker couldn't have been more different. So Robertson was from old money. His dad was a politician in Virginia, Congress, Senate.
Oh.
You know, like big money, old money. Pat had a very privileged childhood. He attended Yale Law School. And you've got Jim from this blue-collar Rust Belt family. But somehow the two forged a relationship that would be mutually beneficial. They helped grow the network with a variety show where they hosted interviews and had puppets. Come On Over would eventually become Jim and Tammy Faye Show.
Come On Over. Now,
Yeah.
the puppet shows, it doesn't matter where the puppet show is or the content of said puppet show, but they always give me the creeps.
Really?
Is it you? Not even like marionettes are very interesting to watch because so much skill goes into moving them or something. But when you get down to the sock puppets and the very low budget, go to YouTube and Google scariest video ever.
Okay, no, they're pretty creepy.
And I'm pretty sure this one
Some
show
of
is
them.
going to come up, and it's going to be the weirdest shit you ever seen.
Well, if you're from Western North Carolina, you probably have heard of Toy Box, the cartoon witch. He has an amazing puppet show. It's like an adult show. He does some stuff for kids too, but he is I guess I would consider him a friend. We've done some work together, some shows.
Well, his are awesome.
But his puppets are amazing.
They're very funny.
And there are several puppeteers in and around Asheville that I've been impressed with their stuff. But yeah, marionettes, puppets, they can be very creepy.
Especially
No doubt.
the kids show ones. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, this show, the Jim and Tammy Faye Show, wow. So popular. They filmed it in front of a live audience every day, and they filled the audience.
See, it's like at this point, their rise is meteoric. You know, when I'm at this point on, there's no looking back for these two.
The set would evolve into something more elaborate over time, and kids waited usually 4 to 6 weeks for tickets to attend a live taping. The Bakkers were off script, and they used improv throughout the show, and they continue to do this for 20 years on television, which gave their shows a very natural and sometimes like goofy appeal.
Yeah.
Because they were just being themselves and interacting like husband and wife. I mean...
Oh, my God. They were pre-podcasting together.
They were
They were broadcasting. Oh, my gosh.
And for those who knew Tammy, they would say that what you saw on the show was like Tammy unfiltered. Like she was just herself. Like she was not putting on any airs or trying to be anything other than just Tammy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
People said she was like, oh, she's very much herself on that show. Like, just kind of sweet and goofy.
Well, and I think this would be why they got so popular so fast. Because you could, relate with them, and they were very down-to-earth seeming.
The show was just super authentic. There were times that the couple would take their, like, off-air fights onto the show.
Really?
And Tammy would use her puppets to say what she was feeling and thinking.
Wow.
And people ate it up because they were just so relatable. They became local celebrities, making appearances at shopping malls and events, bringing along their puppets. And this was in the Portsmouth, Virginia area where they broadcast from Pat Robertson's network.
Man, and people be like when then people talk about bands and they're like, oh, I saw so and so back in the day on the in the bar in Seattle. They'll be like, I saw the Jim and Tammy Faye back when they was at the mall with the puppets.
Well, that would be awesome. Well, because Portsmouth's like in the Hampton Roads area, so you've got Portsmouth, Hampton Roads, Norfolk, Virginia Beach. Right there along the Chesapeake Bay. I mean, and Richmond's very close, Williamsburg. So that's like a good little area to be, like a good regional place to have a good regional TV show.
Yeah, there's a lot going on around there.
Definitely. Huge military population. Well, Dylan, let's pause for a moment so we can hear from today's sponsors. By 1967, the show had a 3,000 membership fan club, and it became an anchor for the network. The same year, Jim was promoted to vice president and television production manager for CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network. Jim headed up fundraising efforts for the network. He would break down crying during live broadcasts, asking for money to keep the efforts going for the shows. The telethons that were led by Jim were a huge success. Building on the telethon success, a new show called 700 Club was launched in 1966.
Oh my gosh, before this we didn't have the 700 Club?
No, it's not been around for the centuries you might imagine.
I thought it had been around since like the 1850s.
That show's been around since 1835.
Well, some of their non-progressive thoughts lean that way. Yeah, you got to be at least 125 years old to be saying the stuff they say on the 700
Pat
Club.
Robertson, I feel like Pat Robertson is like Weekend at Bernie's. He's Bernie. Like, he died like 20 years ago.
Yep.
And he's just like an animatronic. And he's got people like bringing him along, and he's like a robot preaching about like women will become lesbians if
Wasn't
they're
he going
feminists
to
and
blow the
murder
hurricane
children.
away?
No, that was a different.
Oh, but still, it's that type of stuff.
That was a different televangelist.
Get out here, hurricane.
He blew the COVID. Remember? That was COVID. I don't think it was a hurricane.
Oh my God, baby. I think we should make an entire episode where we blow on mics.
Okay.
Okay, we'll try that. Yeah, so this is the start of something huge that would go on to make, I'm going to guess, hundreds of millions of dollars as far as this network, these types of shows. I mean, they're growing to this day.
700 Club's still on the air.
Oh my God.
And if you're Southern, you're in the Appalachian Mountain, you've probably heard of the 700 Club. I'm assuming maybe the rest of the world has as well. If not, you should look into it. It's interesting.
Somebody's went by their grandmama's house or granddaddy and they had it on the 700 Club. I guarantee it.
Well, there were 6 to 10 phone lines, and people would call in with prayer requests and such. Jim hosted a few nights a week, and then Pat Robertson, along with some others, would be on the alternative nights. And this is because Jim and Pat didn't really get along at this point. So they're kind of doing, like, they don't want to work together, so they're kind of doing their own things separately but together, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, that's what happens when people who have tension, business tension or whatever, but they still make money together. So they're going to deal with it and keep making that money.
Jim tended to be a micromanager, which led to a lot of conflicts with other CBN staff members. One staff member named Scott Ross wanted new programming to reach out to like the 60s counterculture at the time. He had these ideas that we can do a show where we focus on youth counterculture, we play some of that music, and then we sort of debate philosophies behind it.
Dude, he was ahead of his time.
But Jim was like, hell no. Jim opposed these ideas fiercely. He and Tammy Faye wanted to keep the channel 100% Christian.
Well, this guy would have brought in a whole nother demographic of adult youngsters, young people at that time, and they would still be, maybe watching it to today. So that was very forward thinking of that program director.
By 1972, the Bakkers were beginning to feel ostracized at the station. They had differing ideas of how Christianity worked and should be presented to audiences. So they decided to pack up and leave the station, but not their careers in television. The Bakkers formed a nonprofit they called Trinity Broadcasting Systems, along with their new ministry in 1972. They sold their Portsmouth, Virginia home, bought another trailer, and hit the road again. They would travel to other TV stations airing what they called bicycling, so it would be like videotapes of their show to, peddle it to other networks or other TV stations.
Also, just like something other stations can plug in for a few hours?
Yeah, like here's some content. We'll sell, 5 tapes to you for X amount of money or whatever.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, so they were kind of going around bicycling these tapes. They would travel to, and at the time, all these TV stations were small, locally owned channels. So they were much more receptive to buying this content.
So they're literally going like in the doors from driving station to station with their videotapes?
Reminds me of in The Coal Miner's Daughter, how
Yeah.
Dew and Loretti would drive to the radio stations, to all of the AM stations, and be like, play my record.
Yeah, that was
So it's like that, yeah.
Tommy Lee and was it Sissy Spacek?
Yeah.
They did such a great job in that movie.
He was a great Doolittle Lynn.
Oh, so you want to fight him?
It's one of my favorite movies. So they would hold telethons at these stations and help them raise money, because Jim was just this really gifted telethon host. Like, he could get people to open their wallets.
So they walked away from being some pretty good success there at that CBN network, and they're right back to hustling. They're not going to give up, and they're going to have their own thing.
Yes, exactly. In 1973, along with some others, they launched a plan to buy a TV station in Southern California. So they pulled together a lot of different talent. It was mostly people without college degrees, but people who they knew were smart and eager to serve God. So they were rounding out the staff. But it was all so low budget, like the lowest budget broadcasting possible. Kind of like us, Dylan. They had hardly any equipment. The show PTL Club launched in the spring of 1973. And if you want to know what PTL means...
Can I tell you? Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord.
Praise Him.
The Praise the Lord Club. Now, it was a 5-hour show that was on the air 7 nights a week.
Oh
So
my
5
God.
hours each night.
How are that? That's a lot of airtime.
Yeah, and think it's all improv. So they didn't have the proper equipment. It was this really patchwork show. Like, sometimes they would hold up a sign that was back in 5 minutes, but then they'd have to change it to back in 35 minutes because a camera went down.
Oh my God, I got to look at some of that. I got to look some of that up.
Yeah, if you can find some, it's pretty great.
Sounds awesome.
Ted Turner owned WRET in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he reached out to buy some episodes of the PTL Club for broadcast. This would provide a huge lifeline to the Bakkers ministry. The Bakkers began sending tapes to the channel for rebroadcast. Then, after hosting a live telethon in Charlotte, they decided to make the move there in January of 1974. They were super excited because they did this telethon. There was a 2,400 attended audience. So it was a full house, packed house, sold out show, if you want to call it that. These people were really energized, excited. They just ate the Bakkers up. They were like, y'all are amazing. We love you. And Jim, they just liked this so much that they decided to, hey, we're gonna go to Charlotte.
It is. Religion aside, it is a show they're bringing, and their religious enthusiasm is probably just adding to it. But yes, it sounds like they definitely put a performance on.
Once in Charlotte, their ministry was thriving, and it was pulling in about $140,000 a month.
Oh my God.
Jim Bakker's spending was out of control, though.
Well, look, that's like drug dealer money coming in. That's a lot of money, $140,000 a month, even after everything has to be paid out of that back in what, 80s, early 80s?
This was in the 70s.
Still 70s?
Yeah, we're still in the 70s.
Well, that's
This is
huge
74,
money.
75.
That's huge money back then.
Yeah, he rents a huge old furniture store, and that's where they set up their broadcast for the show.
Okay.
It's they rent out this, big furniture store. That's where they're broadcasting from. But they start pulling in about $140,000 a month. But like I said, Jim's spending just out of control. Like, he has no business sense. Just buy. We'll do this. I mean, he's just like an idea guy. Money is no limit, even though he doesn't have any money.
Yeah, and he's probably already got people gravitating to him to take advantage of that and siphon it off in shitty business deals.
Now, by the late 1970s, PTL, praise the Lord, Dylan.
Welcome back to the Praise the Lord Network. Later on, we're going to be praising the Lord. But first, let's get back to your primetime show, Praising the Lord.
Praising the Lord with Dylan. Okay, so by the late 70s, PTL's growth was unprecedented. Affiliate stations were buying PTL programming and carrying it. And by 1979, 218 stations. And the majority of these were not in the Bible Belt, surprisingly.
See, these stations are loving this stuff, this content, because it's generating ad revenue, and it's very popular, it sounds like.
They were carrying gym shows. And like I said, this was not in the South, in the Bible Belt, in places that you would expect. This was like in Miami, Los Angeles.
Well, that's just, that's crazy, because I guess people just like them, or maybe the spectacle of it all.
When Jim Bakker asked for pledges, the phone lines lit up, money rolled in. They started like weekend telethons, like that would become a staple. Is, on Saturday, Sunday, we're doing telethons. People call in, give them money. Television defined American culture in the 1970s. So we got to understand the period in which this is happening. It happened in a way like never before, and probably will never happen again. The 70s. I mean, TV exploded. ABC, NBC, and CBS were the three major networks, and they became multi-billion-dollar businesses during this time. So the fact that PTL had been involved early on, and, they had the rebroadcasts on these affiliate stations in the very beginning, it gave them a huge advantage later on, because they had already built up this audience. And as TV is exploding,
right,
more people are watching, they already have a big audience from the beginning.
Yeah.
So it encouraged the networks to keep airing their shows because they had been so popular before TV was like a huge thing.
Yeah, so they know they got a winner.
Yeah. In May of 1977, 6 months after Ted Turner's Atlanta CNN station began a 24-hour satellite service and broadcasting 24 hours.
So, yeah, Ted was the pioneer of the 24-hour network.
Jim Bakker was plotting how he could do the same with PTL. The uplink would cost about $49,000 a month, but that turned out to be pennies when the audience and the fundraising opened up for Jim.
So he's broadcasting his very own signal.
PTL had been running out of this old furniture store, but they soon realized they needed to expand the space. So for $200,000, they bought a 3-story house on 25 acres near Charlotte's South Side. And even before they'd moved into this new house, Bakker broke ground on another 54,000 square foot studio that he would call International Counseling and Broadcast Center. It would cost $3 million to build, which was a stark contrast to the $1,875 a month they were paying to rent out the furniture store.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So he's got this satellite link. He's doing 24-hour Christian broadcasting of PTL and breaking ground on a new, big, huge studio space.
And see, it's funny. It's like it's never, you said it's drove him all his life, this feeling of not enough, never enough. I want more. It's not good enough yet. You can tell by the way he keeps, because they're doing fine. If they would, concentrate and maybe slow down, they're making this immense amount of money, but it just seems like it's like people's ego comes into it at a certain point, and it's just about the expansion and power.
And some people just aren't good at business.
Well, no, the very end of the story, being very horrible at business is what landed everyone in jail.
It was a state-of-the-art facility, this huge thing he's building. It has 208 theater-style seats, 9,000 square foot of floor space, but it was not nearly enough space to house all of Jim Bakker's employees, PTL's employees. So Bakker bought another 1,200-acre tract for more development, such as a headquarters.
Yeah.
3 massive, construction projects underway at the same time. January 2nd, 1978, Bakker broke ground on the first building at what he would eventually call Heritage USA.
And this is where it just really scales up. And these construction projects are kind of almost next generation. They're just huge. They start building huge hotels. I mean, it just has such a, I don't know. Everything's got to be big and so flashy, it seems, with Jim Bakker.
There's so much to this story. And by the way, in case I didn't mention it, this is going to be a 2-part episode.
Yeah, this is...
There's no way we can get all of this into one part.
No.
So we're in the first part right now. And I'm going to, we'll wrap up here in a minute and then we'll have to come back with a second episode because there's so much. But I think it's a fascinating story. And to my knowledge, I don't think any other true crime podcast has covered this.
I've never heard their backstory from anyone. Newspaper, nothing. I didn't know any of that.
Back to Jim Bakker. So he starts building Heritage USA. Bakker continues raising money. Calls pour in. People are really into the way he hosts these telethons because they're getting real-time contact with people. Like they have real people in the studio answering calls and you're talking to a real person. It's not automated. It's not like pre-recorded broadcast.
Oh, dude, they're like
live.
Waving, saying callers' names and waving from a phone and stuff. So this is very early on in the TV was the reason I think it exploded so much. It was the first real ad generator, and you can get direct. It's a very dynamic medium, and you can do all this stuff with ads and advertising and just the money, the billions and billions.
The audience at home was eating it up. They're having this real contact. You got to consider a lot of the people that were calling in were elderly, so maybe they didn't have a big social life.
Yeah.
So just being able to call in and having somebody listen to them, they loved it. I mean, this was like fucking crazy. It just exploded how people just ate it up. So they had these people who would answer the phones that would pray with callers. Callers were urged to call back if they experienced a healing.
Oh.
They had 60 women answering phones and about 600 calls a day coming in. This was by the end of 1978.
Just call back and be like, I just want to let you guys know, I know I gave you $100, but my legs grew back.
Thank you for praying with me. This is what happened. I experienced
my
this,
legs
and
came
I know
back.
that it was like a miracle. Thank you. Yes.
I feel strongly it was a miracle.
There was nothing like PTL Club on television. And by the end of the decade, PTL's viewership was well into millions. Bakker never used scripts and relied solely on his improv skills. Instead of reading from a script, Bakker would have spontaneous performances led by the Holy Spirit.
Oh, man.
Sermons, prayers, and such were unpredictable. You never knew what was going to happen, and audiences fucking loved it.
I'll tell you, that old Jim Bakker, did you see him last night, man?
People turned on the TV just to see what was going to happen next.
See, now it's just a sheer spectacle, and you got non-religious people tuning in, probably.
Like, the one time, they brought a camel in on a live show, and it pissed everywhere.
Oh, my God.
Flooded the stage and out into the crowd.
Oh, that is incredible. I got to look for that clip for sure.
Yeah. Tammy hosted an entire show once from a merry-go-round.
Oh
and one of the cameramen got sick from going round and round for hours. They had celebrity guests like Colonel Sanders from Kentucky Fried Chicken. They had astronauts, Little Richard.
Oh my God. Little Richard on the PTL Club?
Yes. Because Little Richard kind of would go back and forth in his career from rock and roll to gospel.
Oh yeah.
He
I forgot that.
He had moments of kind of, going back to religion and that kind of thing. But they would come on the show. They would give their testimonies. PTL had already begun expanding programming overseas. Larry Flint, who had become a born-again Christian. And if you know Larry Flint, we're talking Larry Flint from the Hustler magazine, Hustler Clubs. Remember he was shot in the 70s?
Yeah.
Well, after was shot, he became a born-again Christian, had a very close relationship with President Carter's wife. Was her name Rosalind Carter?
Now, was that do you know, was that an attempted assassination
Yeah.
on Mr. Flint?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, wow.
So he came on the show, and Jim Bakker caught a lot of flack from others in the community, in their Pentecostal community, as well as like televangelists and other preachers.
Well,
had feelings about Larry Flint being on the show.
Well, he's a firebrand, and his belief in free speech is, he's been very vocal about what he believes. So yeah, I can imagine the religious communities not that excited about him.
Well,
being
Jim Bakker's attitude was, here's a man who's devoted his life to God now. He's a born-again Christian. He has a testimony. People can relate to this guy. I mean, he's a sinner, but having him on the show, Bakker was like, look, it just goes to show that anybody, no matter what you've done, can come to the Lord. Dude,
it's the best example of that. Here's Larry Flint turned back to God. I mean, Jim could play that, and I'm sure
Jim
he knew
was
that.
Totally playing that. I mean, that was his whole thing, was this is the kind of person we need to have on this show. This is how you're going to convert people. This is how you're going to get people to accept the Lord into their hearts. I mean, because anybody can, right? And these other ministers and televangelists were like, he is the last person that you need to have on there. That is not a good representation of who we are. So it was an interesting time. But Bakker was also doing very revolutionary things at his station.
Well, see, that's the thing, is it is so new, this kind of exposure. You had Ted Turner, starting the 24-hour cable cycle, the birth of cable, really, and everyone's looking for content, and it's like the audience is hungry for content. And this just being able to, they're just eating this up, and now Jim and Tammy are driving the boat. They're at the head of their entire own business and organization.
Yeah. So, things are different there. Like I said, he has Larry Flint. He's just doing these very revolutionary things. And he felt God wanted him to elevate women in the workplace. Having watched the women's movement in the 60s and into the 70s. And he was like, if I see all these women coming together and they're asking for rights and they want fair treatment in the workplace. And he was like, well, then obviously that must be God working. And that's God sending a message that this is what he wants. So Jim Bakker brought that back in and hired as many female staffers as he could.
Oh, I bet Jim did.
And having Tammy Faye host her own show. And she had a show that was, it was kind of like a lifestyle show where she would just talk about being a mom, clothes, shop, just anything, recipes, cooking.
See, that's very
almost like a Martha Stewart type of show.
Yeah, and that's rather progressive for those times,
because he wanted to be able to reach a female audience, which I think that's a pretty cool thing to be doing there. Catch myself. Okay. So by the end of 1979, Jim Bakker had shifted his focus to Heritage USA. So building this park, Bakker felt, was truly a conception of faith. The ministry was bringing in about $4 million a month now. No. And it cost about $1 million to buy the airtime on the affiliate stations. The network's profitability was allowing for Jim to expand his dreams. Now, the plans for Heritage USA included a university, campground, a day school, as well as a vacation retreat.
It's like an amusement park, dude.
It would cost nearly $100 million, according to estimates. The Bakkers began taking weekend trips to Disney World so they could get ideas for Heritage USA. Jim decided he needed a hospital, a nursing home. He was going to need a loan of about $50 million to get started on this project.
See, this is just, he's not a good businessman, like you've pointed out over and over. And he's really there's no sense to get this overextended. He's making all that, he's making cocaine money.
He is making cocaine
$4 million a month back then. Taking about 2.57 to the house for himself, probably. I mean, that's a huge amount of money. Can't you just be happy? You're going to take $100 million or $50 or $100 million loan out to do this huge construction project you have no experience in. So, yeah.
His financial advisors all thought he was crazy to take on this mountain of debt. No bank would loan PTL that kind of money, but Jim Bakker pushed on with his plans. He was falling behind on payments to the construction company, like more than $2 million he owed. So he took to television and asked his audience to send in money. Jim Bakker was reaching out for every dime he could get. And not only was the construction debt growing, but other areas were struggling too, because Jim was just he was just hemorrhaging money. He's spending all of the money he can building this park, this Heritage USA Park.
Yes, and his organization is growing on top of that. And, it's just like any business, is he cutting costs and being smart about, leases and things like that?
PTL was in a serious financial crisis. During a board meeting, Bakker tells members that he's planning to downsize the staff. He had 690 employees, and he was going to downsize, get rid of, like 30% of those people. He was going to stop producing a publication called Action, though Action had taken in $3.4 million in revenue, which had doubled from the previous year.
Oh, what the? See, that's not a good business decision.
During the meeting, they agree to fire employees, but then the board also gives themselves pay raises. Go figure.
Oh, not the board.
Now, during this meeting, Bakker also made the motion that the new policy would be not giving financial information to the press.
So, that's not good.
The nonprofit and the company had been very transparent in their audits of the ministry. Many fired employees complained they were not compensated for overtime work, and the U.S. Labor Department orders PTL to pay $34,045 in unpaid overtime wages.
Well, that's a good bit of wages back then.
Yeah.
So, they'd screwed some people out of money they owed them.
And during this time, Jim Bakker's salary, like, he's bringing in $4 million, but he's only paying himself like $600 a week.
Yeah, but I'm going to guess there's some huge expense account or something tied to all that too.
Funny you should mention that, Dylan. This is where we are going to end episode 1. Part 1 of this story.
Their story is a big story.
It is.
You haven't even got to the real
We haven't even gotten to the crime part yet, but we're getting there.
Oh my God. When it goes on, I remember this as a young person, this going on, raised here in North Carolina. So it was a very, very big deal. And this just exploded like OJ style when it went off like a bomb.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
It was everywhere.
Damn it.
All right, Dylan. Well, that wraps up part 1 of this 2-part series on PTL and Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker.
Yes, and if you can't get enough of Mountain Murders, visit patreon.com, and there's some other goofy stuff on there.
Yeah, we have all sorts of content over on Patreon, of course. We try to upload every week. We're actually going to have a Patreon virtual live show tomorrow for everyone who's on Patreon, so might want to go ahead and join up real quick so you can be part of that.
Yeah, and I always forget to add that on Patreon, don't forget you have commercial-free episodes.
That is true. That is one of the perks of joining Patreon, ad-free episodes.
All of them, y'all.
Yeah, it's great. Also, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and you can email mountainmurderspodcast@gmail.com if you have feedback, a story recommendation, or just want to say hi. We love it.
We do love it.
You can also hit subscribe and give us a 5-star review. Ooh, that just makes us smile.
Oh, good. Reading good reviews is the best.
We've had some great reviews lately. We appreciate that. We have listeners in England, Great Britain, Australia.
I know. Good day, mate.
I love it. Megan in Australia.
Yeah, Americans do horrible Australian accents.
I want to go to Australia.
I told her I would like to come there.
I've always wanted to go. We should try to plan a trip.
And then I think she got freaked out, thought I meant to her house. I just meant the continent.
Yeah, I mean, we could say hi while we're there, but we would love to visit. Dylan probably wants to go to the Outback.
How cool would that be? Go have a beer with a fan and friend in Australia.
Oh my God, I want to go to an Australian beach, Dylan. I want to be like Bodie in Point Break. Rob a bank, surf my way to death. Yes.
Yeah, he went out on his own terms, damn it.
I can't surf, but Charlie can't surf. All right, guys. I'll see you in part 2. When it comes to coffee, I refuse to settle. Also, I'm a Taurus, so I'm all about decadence. I've been drinking delicious cold brew coffee in my Café de Chateau cold brew coffee maker. I feel like a barista at home. Cold brewing allows the coffee's natural flavors to shine through without the bitterness. If you're a coffee lover like me, order a Café de Chateau cold brew coffee maker today. Use our discount code, Mountain Murders Podcast, for 20% off. The best part is the company offers exceptional customer service, including a lifetime warranty on all their products. No questions asked. With the holidays coming up, save time and money. Purchase a Café de Chateau cold brew coffee maker, and you'll be the best gift giver of all time, and everyone will love you.